This is Dishin Dirt with Gary Pickren, South Carolina's only podcast dedicated to the real estate agent craft. And now, the host of Dishin Dirt, Gary Pickren.
And greetings, welcome back everyone to another episode of Dishin Dirt. I'm your often opinionated but rarely wrong host, Gary Pickren, coming to you from the beautiful downtown Columbia, South Carolina offices of Blair, Cato, Pickren, Castleline. This the third week of January 2025. Big show for you online this week. We are going to be talking about the 10 biggest real estate stories that happened in 2025 that affected you as a real estate agent. Though that list was composed by yours truly, Dishin Dirt made that determination of what we thought were the biggest stories of this year. Now, before we get to that, we are going to talk about a couple of other things. Number one is do not forget about our Real Estate Success Summit, the fourth annual, in matter of fact, will be on January 29th at 9:30 to about 3:30 at Central Energy Building here in Columbia, South Carolina. That is right behind the Fireflies baseball stadium, and you're not going to want to miss this year's show. We've got Carlin Ancron from OSNAP Social. We got Chelsea Pites, who has been voted by Inman News as one of the top 50 marketers in all of real estate in the entire country. She's been at NAR, California, Florida Realtors, you name it. She's been there. Your brokerage, I guarantee you, she's even spoken to your brokerage at Keller Williams or Coldwell Banker, or you name it, she's been there. And then we have Bill Sabata coming back from Close Simple, and he's always done a great job. You're going to enjoy seeing some new information from him. And we have a bunch of small TED Talks, little 10, 15-minute talks on various topics by a bunch of different speakers. So you're going to get a lot of information. You're going to walk out of that meeting with a ton of to-do lists to make your business in 2025 the best it's going to be. And we already know from last week's show, NAR is predicting a 9% increase in business. So you want to get that 9% and then some. So be sure to come to this year's show. We have, if you go to blaircato.com, check the button up there at the top that says Summit. Everything you need to know about the Summit, all the information right there. You can go ahead and get your tickets. You still can get a table if you don't want to just get a single ticket. All you team leaders or brokers, a lot of them are already doing it. You want to go, you can decide who you want to sit with and when you want to show up, and that table will be reserved for you. So go ahead and grab your table. You can also buy individual tickets if you prefer. Now, the big news, the big announcement for Dishin Dirt is you can now watch Dishin Dirt on YouTube. This is the first time we've ever done this, and so we're going to see how it goes. It'll probably be a little learning experience for me. But now I am recording in Riverside.fm, which is not only sound, but also video. And so what I'm hopeful for that we'll see happen here as we move through the year with Dishin Dirt is that we might be able to put up some graphics and put up some videos and other things that those that want to watch it on YouTube can see as we describe them to you guys on the podcast. But you also will have what they call magic clips or some shorts, which would be little 30-second to a minute clips that will also be on social media so that you can follow up and watch those as well. So we're really excited about being able to put this on YouTube. It's going to change the podcast, how I record it, and it's going to be very nerve-wracking for me because it's a little bit harder to edit and to clip things together. But we'll see how it goes, and we'll go from there. Obviously, we also have our new logo for Dishin Dirt, and that new logo, as well as our famous saying of often opinionated but rarely wrong, will be on the back of that t-shirt. If you want those t-shirts, those are for free. All you have to do is like us and subscribe to us on Instagram. So go put in Dishin Dirt Podcast on Instagram and you will find it. It will come right on up, DISHIN_DIRT podcast. Go ahead and subscribe to us and then direct message us, DM us the size of the shirt you would like and what office you would like to pick the shirt up from. Now, if you're in Charleston, one of our other markets that we're not in, just let me know where you are. We'll see if we can't make arrangements to maybe get it to one brokerage or to the Realtor Association so you can get your t-shirt as well. So let's go ahead and move right on into our top 10 stories as determined by the crackpot staff of Dishin Dirt. That staff would be me. So these are my top 10. So let's start at number one. The number one, we're going to do these from 1 to 10. There's really no order, but we're going to start at number one. The biggest story of 2024 was, without a doubt, Sitzer Burnette. There can be nothing else that can be said that can be anywhere closer, even close to Sitzer Burnette. It was by far the biggest story. And of course, we're talking about the settlement of the lawsuit, $418 million lawsuit or settlement from the National Association of REALTORS. And you add another about $500 or $600 million on top of that from various real estate brokerage companies such as Keller Williams and EXP and others. And it wound up being a massive settlement that did change how you guys conduct your business. In the end, I don't think it's going to be a negative. I think it's going to be a positive. I've talked about this all over the state of South Carolina and into Georgia and North Carolina. I think that the changes are actually going to be positive. And what we noticed from the settlement, the big changes, was the end of the commission being shown on the MLS. That's the big change, the end of the commission on the MLS. And at the time, there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of the teeth that if I can't put it on MLS, how will I ever make a penny? It didn't change anything. In fact, it probably solidified what your commissions were, because what happened was no one was looking on MLS anymore. No one was predetermining what your commissions were anymore. You were no longer, as a buyer agent, stuck with whatever the seller's agent decided to pay you. It now was all determined and set forth basically at the time of the contract, usually using, if you're doing it the right way, Form 120. And so what I think that I have seen, anecdotally speaking to a lot of the agents, top team leaders that we've talked with, is that it's a lot easier to get the seller to pay your full commission, what you want to be paid on the seller side, when you're not worried about having them agree to what they're going to pay on the buyer side up front. This is my fee. I'm X. What you pay the buyer is between you and the buyer's agent, and my fee's X. And it might even be more than what you would traditionally get. And we're seeing that people are not having trouble making that sale. And then on the buyer side, what we're finding is that if your fee was Y and the seller was only willing to pay X toward your fee, in the past, you would only take that. You would not take the entire commission that you were entitled to. And you would obviously walk away from what your seller had agreed or your buyer had agreed to pay you. Now that has changed. The buyers understand going in, that's the fee. Hopefully the seller or seller's agent will pay a portion of it. If not, I'm paying the difference. And so that is, in my opinion, been a very good positive change. And I believe we will continue to see good agents be able to explain their value, that they don't sell real estate. They navigate real estate. They help navigate you from I'm ready to buy or I'm ready to sell all the way through the closing process. And I think what you're going to see moving forward is that as good agents understand it, as good agents learn how to do it, that you're going to see more and more agents who are happy with this position, this new way of doing commission, and they're actually going to find that they make more money this way. So I think that is one of the big takeaways from Sitzer Burnette. The number 2 takeaway was the touring agreement, which we're going to talk about here in a few more minutes, about how that you were not allowed to show a house to a buyer or consumer until you had an agreement signed. Keep in mind, the word touring agreement doesn't show up in the settlement at all. We just started calling it a touring agreement. But the bottom line is that's a document that required you to have something signed prior to showing a buyer a house. And then the big change, which is probably a fair change, is that you can't make more than you agreed to in your agreement with the consumer. In the past, if my buyer was my absolute best friend and I agreed to help him buy a house for 1X, and then we found a house in which the listing agent was willing to pay X, then I would take 3X. And my friend would say, but I thought I was only paying you 1X. And your answer to that would be, well, you're not paying me anything. The seller's paying it. The reality of it is it was a payment from the buyer because it was built into the price of the house. Theoretically, the buyer should have been able to ask for a lower price, because they weren't paying the remaining 2X. And so now that can't happen. If you've agreed to take X, you can't take 3X because the seller's willing to pay you 3X. The only time you can go up, I believe, in your fees is when you provide additional services. So that is something very good, I think, is also in the settlement. So story number 1 is the settlement. Now, the interesting thing about the settlement is we thought that was the end of the settlement. So kind of part 2 of the first big story was that in South Carolina, we actually had a lawsuit filed after the settlement against, I think it was like 63 brokerages in South Carolina were sued by a South Carolina lawyer, basically along the same grounds as Sitzer Burnette. And that was a big case. So most of those people that were realtors are asserting the defense of the settlement as why they cannot be sued. But those brokerages that were not realtors, they're having to try to figure out how to resolve this settlement on their own. So they're going to have a lot of problems there and a lot of things they're going to have to do themselves. So now story number 2 that was very big this year was interest rates. What we saw throughout 2024 was interest rates stayed in pretty much the high 6s and ranged somewhat into the 7s. The majority of the year, they were in the high 6s. I think the range was from 6.08% to 7.22%. To give you some historical numbers, let's just look at some of these historical numbers throughout that year. When we started the year, the rates were about 6.6 on average back in January, and they quickly climbed all the way up to 7.2% in March. And once they peaked out at 7.22% in March, we saw a precipitous drop all the way down to 6.47 by the time we got into August. And then by the time we got into October, the rates had dropped all the way down to 6.08%, 6.08% from 7.22%. So a real nice drop there. However, once we got through October, we started seeing that climb again all through October. And we peaked out again there sometime at the end of November at 6.81, dropped again down to 6.6 in December, around December 12th. And we finished the year at 6.93. So starting at 6.60 and finishing at 6.93 with a high along the way of being at 7.22 and the lowest for the year being at 6.08. So the interest rates were the big story. The interest rates do cause a lot of problems in our market. Obviously, as our interest rates are that high, it does affect the affordability and ability of people to buy houses. So some people might be sitting on the fence, weren't buying. But on top of that, you had that lock-in effect where there were people who were ready to buy or sell a house, but their interest rate was below 4, and they just weren't willing to go that high up with a new mortgage in order to buy a new house. Luckily, I believe life is getting in the way of life, and some of those people who don't necessarily want to give up on that 4% mortgage they have, if the rates are in the low 6s, they might be more willing to do that. It's only a 2 percentage points increase, but they may have no choice. They've gotten married, they've lost a spouse, maybe they got a divorce, somebody passed away, children who've grown up and left the house, maybe they've had another child, maybe they need to move to a different school district for a program for the child. Life gets in the way of our plans, and so we're hopeful that a lot of these people who were locked in on these rates perhaps now have decided that they're no longer locked in. All right, number 3, NAR problems. A lot of these problems happened in 2024, have rolled over into 2025. As I've said it many, many times, I'm a huge fan of SCR, South Carolina Realtors Association. Byron King over there is a tremendous lawyer. Nick Romitis, a great leader. Austin Smallwood, very dedicated. Lindsay, they're all very dedicated and good people, and they work very hard. Sometimes I feel like they do too much, trying to go too hard for the Realtors Association. But that's their job, is to do everything they can for the realtors to make their jobs better. And in doing so, they make it better for all real estate agents. Whether you're a realtor or not, the changes that SCR is going for and the things that they're fighting for actually makes the job of all real estate licensees, whether you're a realtor or not, better. So that's very good. And my hat's off to these guys. They really got handed a crap sandwich when the NAR settlement went through. They weren't given a lot of guidance on what to do and how to handle it. And so they've had to kind of wing it and go best they could with the Forms 120s and all the other stuff that they've done. And so my hat's off to them. Same thing at the local level, whether it's, your local associations like CCRA or whatnot, who give free continuing education to the realtors. There's a lot of across the board, from Myrtle Beach to Charleston to Greenville, where these local associations, they're all working very hard to make sure that you're getting the best information, the best advice, the best help. And so that's good. Now, at the same time, you can be mad at NAR, and I think a lot of people are. In fact, I think about 75% of members say they're pissed off at NAR for their handling of the lawsuit. And a lot of people thought that they capitulated and they should have fought, and they shouldn't have put up multi-millionaires like Gary Keller to be witnesses, where they should have put up their average real estate agent to talk about what the average real estate agent does and how much the average real estate agent makes, versus having somebody that's worth tens or probably hundreds of millions of dollars up there explaining. It wasn't a very good approach to the lawsuit. I wasn't involved in this law, so I don't know whether it's the right call or not, but there's a lot of good people out there questioning it. Obviously, the sexual harassment case from 2024 now has bled over into 2025, and that has not been a good look. There's been a lawsuit filed, and those are absolutely horrendous, and those cases continue to go out. And now we obviously know there's an attack on the clear cooperation rule. Which we'll talk about a little bit more. The 3-way agreement. This is where if you want to be a member of the local association, you have to be a member of the state association, and you have to be a member of the NAR. It's really no different than a union. You can't be a member of the local union and not be a member of the national union. So I don't understand what the problem there is. Obviously a lot of agents have problem that the MLS is tied to the association. I have a problem with that. I don't think they should be. I don't even think the NAR should be in the business at all of being in MLSs. I think those should be completely independent of the Realtors Association, like they are here in Columbia. I think that's actually a good thing. But that lawsuit's out there. Not sure that I will have much legs on it. We do know that DOJ, just today, the Supreme Court ruled that the DOJ can reopen its antitrust lawsuits that it had dismissed. Hopefully the new administration will come in and put an end to this DOJ that clearly hates you and hates what you do. If you ever wonder, do you hate your government enough? The answer is you do not. Just look at how the government is treating you for earning a living. And if you don't hate your government enough, something's wrong with you here, because I'm telling you, the Department of Injustice hates your guts. They hate how you make money. They don't like it. They think you should work for free. I don't know what they think, but that's the bottom line. So right now, you have to understand that the Department of Injustice hates you. Hopefully, the new Department of Justice will not hate you and will leave you alone, but we'll see. But that's been a big NAR problem that they're having to deal with the DOJ. And then lastly, you got this Mauricio, what's his name, Umansky, who is from the agency. He's been on the $1 Million Listing LA. I think his wife is one of those Beverly Housewife on shows or whatever those things are called. I hate them. But he has tried his damnedest to create his own private home listing service and try to find an alternative to NAR. And we have to look at really what his motives are. I don't really trust his motives. I think his motives are pure greed. I don't think he's looking at any reason to try to do anything good for the community. I think what he's trying to do is figure out a way he can make both sides of the transaction and limit who gets to be involved in his $1 million transactions, because you lowly lives aren't privileged enough to be part of his world. And I really think that is the case. So we'll see how that plays out. Now let's move over to number 4. Number 4 is EXP ending the broker-to-broker compensation in August of 2024 when the settlement came in. It was shocking at the time, and a lot of people misunderstood it, thinking that EXP was going to make sure their clients didn't pay the buyer's agents, and that was not at all what that was about. But I believe that Leo Pereira is actually onto something here, and he came on our podcast and he talked about it for a good 45 minutes. But I think that is probably where we're going to see broker-to-broker comp go in 2025, is it's probably going to go away. If you look at what the lawsuit was based on, the lawsuit was all about why was the listing agent involved in what the buyer and the buyer's agents were getting paid? Why was the listing agent involved at all? What is it, if any, concern of a listing agent, how much money a buyer's agent makes? It's none. It's zero concern. So why are they involved in setting that commission price through their listing agreement? Why are they determining in the MLS listings how much money they were going to get paid? Why were they involved? It made no sense at all. And I think if you look at that aspect of the lawsuit, it does make sense. A listing agent should have nothing to do with it. Now, they have gone to the extreme, the Department of Injustice and Catchmark. They wanted it where the listing agent was paid by the seller, the buyer's agent was paid by the buyer, and there could be no carryover. You couldn't even ask for them to pay. That was going to destroy real estate, and that was probably going to destroy the world economy because these idiots weren't thinking that through. But I do believe there's merit in ending broker to broker. So the reason you should get rid of it is you shouldn't be involved in it, period. It's a listing agent. It makes it easier for you. I don't know why you would want to be involved in it. Why, when you're meeting with your seller, do you even want to talk about what a buyer agent gets paid? And I know a lot of people are like, well, if they're not willing to pay 2X or 3X or 4X, we'll never be able to sell the property. We don't know what they're willing to do yet. We don't know what the buyer's even going to ask. Maybe the buyer's paying cash and they're not going to ask. Maybe they're unrepresented, they're not going to ask. Maybe they're getting paid 1X and they're only going to ask for 1. So why are we already trying to set these numbers in stone? The bottom line is a listing agent should only worry about what they're going to get paid, period, and then have a conversation with the seller that at some point the buyer's probably going to ask you to pay part of their commission. You will need to decide as to what that is. We don't need to decide today because we haven't even seen their offer. I joke all the time. I have a 2023 Corvette. It's my baby. I love my car. It's not for sale. So if you say, I want to buy your car, I tell you it's not for sale. But if you're going to say, well, I'll pay you $200,000, hand wash it, wax it, and deliver it to your house and take an Uber home, and you'll be my best friend, because it ain't nowhere worth that. So why would I say no until I know what you're willing to offer? And that's the same thing with commissions. Why are we automatically, as a seller, saying, I'm not paying a buyer's commission when you don't even know what they're offering? Maybe they're going to offer you 20% over list price. I'm pretty sure at 20% over list price, I pay anything you want me to pay, closing costs and real estate commissions. So we have got to do a better job of teaching our sellers that fact right there. All right. Number 5, commission acts to fix the touring agreement. I mentioned the touring agreement was one of the big changes that came out of this settlement. The real estate commission worked very hard and came up with a solution. The solution was basically that in South Carolina, when the conversation turns substantive, you have to provide the South Carolina brokerage relationship disclosure form. And what we did is we opined that in order to comply with state law, that a substantive contact occurred before you showed the house. So what we're saying is you have to deliver this form to the consumer before you show the house. A couple of years ago, we added a line for you to sign so your client can sign that as proof that you provided it to them. So now you really want to get them to sign it because the settlement says you have to have an agreement signed before you show the house. This can be your agreement. Now, why can this be your agreement? Well, the Real Estate Commission worked with SC Realtors, and we got their input on some of the wording they needed to see, and we were able to add some phrases to the South Carolina seller brokerage or seller brokerage disclosure form. And in doing so, it basically kills 2 birds with 1 stone. It can serve under the state law is the South Carolina broker's disclosure, and it serves under the settlement as your touring agreement. So you don't have to get touring agreement signed anymore. If you get the South Carolina broker's disclosure form signed, then that kills two birds with one stone. So that was the fifth thing that happened, big news in South Carolina. And quite frankly, it was one of the best things that happened in South Carolina in real estate all year, because the Real Estate Commission, I'm proud to say, did an excellent job of getting that put together. Number 6, Real Estate Commission ended wholesaling essentially. The new law came out, defined what wholesaling was, said you had to have a real estate license to be a wholesaler, and then said if you have a real estate license, you can't wholesale. The investors then tried to play semantics with a lot of the terms in there under 4057 135 K9, I believe it was. It says in there that you could sell a contract, but as long as you were not implying that there was underlying property. And so what a lot of the investors were doing is they were reading the first part and saying, well, I can sell a contract. And so what they were doing is they were saying, well, I don't own the property, and they would advertise with a picture of the house, the address, a description of the property, just as if they were marketing the piece of property. And at the bottom, they had put in red, I'm not the owner of the property. I'm marketing a contract. I'm not marketing the property. No, you're marketing property. It's property all over this. And the statute says you can only do that as long as you're not inferring or implying otherwise. So the Real Estate Commission recently, at the end of 2024, came out and issued a really good statement that defined, that really took the definition of a wholesaling and explained what it meant, and said that in order for you to comply, you could sell a contract, but you can't mention anything about the property. They even gave a laundry list saying you couldn't put a picture of the property, you couldn't put a legal description, you couldn't put in how many bedrooms or bathrooms, how many square footage it was, what neighborhood it was, none of that. So essentially, I don't know how you can wholesale if all you can do is say I have a contract, but you can't even tell what neighborhood or anything about the house. So item number 6 was the Real Estate Commission ending wholesaling. Very excited about that, very happy. It was a great job. I had to recuse myself. I work with a lot of wholesalers. I think there is a great place for investors in real estate. I don't think there's any place right now as wholesaling exists for wholesaling. I've said this many times, real estate agents and wholesalers, or actually real estate agents and investors, y'all constantly fight with each other, don't like each other. Quite frankly, y'all should work together with each other, because a good investor could do 5 to 10 transactions every month. A real estate agent doesn't have any clients to do 5 or 10 transactions a month. So if you could figure out a way to work with an investor to help them sell their properties legally, not as wholesale deals, but maybe as an installment contract, then you can get those listings. You can help them receive more money. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if we're using real estate agents to sell their property, they were making more money. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So the people that are doing investing legally and properly in South Carolina, if those people were to hire a real estate agent to sell the property, they're going to, on average, make anywhere between 25 and 40% more money. That's a selling point for you as a real estate agent to convince them to use you. The reason you want to be working with them is because of the number of closings and transactions you can get. All right, number 7, new statute was enacted on May 21st, 2024. Didn't have a lot of time to put it together. The Real Estate Commission was approached by the legislature and said, if you want some changes, make them. We've done multiple podcasts already on this show about how good the changes were in the statute. So I'm not going to reiterate them, but obviously wholesaling was one of the big changes in there. But a lot of good changes throughout there to basically try to close some of the loopholes. There's a big change on the team name. You can now use the word real estate, realty in your team name. They close that loophole on a team cannot advertise, nor can an individual advertise about property without having your full brokerage firm name in the advertisement. But for some reason, as an individual agent, could market all over the place and never mention their broker. So we closed some of those loopholes. So I think the new statute 7 being changed was one of the big stories of the year. It wasn't a huge story because it didn't have major changes, but there were some significant changes in terms of the team names and the wholesaling, which does at least get it put on our list. Number 8, clear cooperation coming under attack. This is just the DOJ being stupid. As y'all know, the rule for clear cooperation is you have 24 hours to put the listing in the multiple listing service. I've done podcasts on this, so I'm not going to go too deep into this again, but clear cooperation ensures equal access to everybody, regardless of what real estate agent you work with or what you look like, where you come from, or who you love. That's the key here. Being a realtor is all about fair housing and equal access. Being a real estate agent should be the same thing, about fair housing and equal access. Your job is to navigate people through the transaction. And if you are already prohibited from navigating somebody through the transaction because they don't have access to those transactions to be able to decide whether they want to buy, it's going to create fair housing problems. And that's what clear cooperation does. If everybody gets the same access on the exact same day at the exact same time, then my client can't be blocked from seeing the house and putting an offer in. But if you can withhold those listings, then you get to determine what group or what subgroup gets to see the property. That's a problem. DOJ keeps talking about how making them put in the MLS is somehow antitrust, but these idiots aren't thinking about the ramifications. I think anybody who looks at it from a fair housing standpoint would realize that if it doesn't have to go on the multiple listing service and equal to everybody, that a brokerage in a small town could control the entire market. And the only way you would be able to see the property is to work with that brokerage, which might not have people who look like you, who might not have people with the same experiences as you, who you just don't want to work with. And if you're an agent, if you want to be able to show properties to your clients in your community, you may have to join that brokerage. So it's going to consolidate these brokerages into big mega brokerages, and it's going to eliminate the small brokerages. And that's why these people want it. That's why these big brokerages want to get rid of it. It allows them to get both sides. It allows them to recruit. You want to sell in downtown Columbia, you have to come work for our company because we have the largest share. We hold our listings, so you're not going to be able to see them. So your clients will never see them. That's a huge problem. That is not fair in our communities. That's not fair in our market. That needs to go away. So clear cooperation is under attack. Hopefully it will survive 2025. I'll make a prediction about that next week on our show. Next, number 9. Got 2 more to go. Number 9, moving to South Carolina became the number 1 place. We already knew South Carolina was the best state ever. We already know that. We know it's a great place to live. It's the price of housing here is insane. The crime is good. The schools are good. We have a great state. Everybody loves it. We noticed it during COVID. Everybody from crazy out west started moving here. But according to U-Haul, they have said that South Carolina is the top state for people moving across state lines. Arrivals accounted for 51.7% of all one-way U-Haul traffic in and out of the state. It is amazing. We're number 1, followed by North Carolina, Florida, Texas, and Indiana. 8 was Oklahoma. Colorado was number 9, it looks like. That's about all I have in my list. But the information is absolutely astonishing. We were number 1. I believe in 2023, we were number 2. So we know that people are moving here. Maybe for some South Carolinians, that's not great. Maybe they don't want all these people moving here, but for real estate people, it's great because we get more closings. It also really goes to how you really need to start marketing and thinking about how I can market outside of South Carolina. How do I make those connections with agents in other places? I will shout out to Keller Williams. That's one thing they've done very well in their teaching is when you go to family reunion, get those names, get those emails, and follow up on that. And that's what you should be doing. Anytime you go to a conference, get names, follow up with Bomb videos. It's an excellent tool. What we're finding out from United Van Lines is that 26.8% of the people moved to South Carolina was for retirement. 21.9% moved to be closer to family. 18% moved for a lifestyle change. And for reason was job, 13.1%. I don't care why they move here. Just keep them coming. Keep them coming because the more they come, the more closings we're going to do. And then finally, number 10, the biggest news, and I think this could have been number 1, quite frankly, that was Dishin Dirt had its 200th episode in 2024. We came up with a new logo in 2024, new T-shirts in 2024. We're now doing this, still 2025, but Riverside, we're moving over in 2025, thought about in 2024. And most importantly, we won the 2024 Title Webby Award for Best Podcast in the marketplace. So very excited, had a huge year. That all goes to you guys for listening to us, following us, being our outspoken fans. Every time I go somewhere, I was in Charleston speaking to a wonderful group of agents. The broker that introduced me spent 5 minutes talking about how the podcast had been such a valuable part of his career and how he wanted every agent there to make it a valuable part of their career. So it humbles me and it makes me happy to hear that people do find true value in Dishing Dirt. And we will continue to do it as long as we feel like we can provide you value. Once we can't provide you value anymore, I'm not going to waste your time. And so 2020, we're really going to spend a lot of time making sure that we're providing you week in and week out value. So if I do that, I ask that you please like us, subscribe to us, and share. So that is our top 10 list for the 2024 year, the top 10 stories of the year. I hope y'all enjoyed that. And please come again next week for another episode of Dish and Dirt. Y'all have a wonderful weekend. I hope you like the new format. We'll let you know how it goes. It'll continue to get better every week as I continue to learn more about how to use Riverside.fm. Y'all take care now.